What's up, Summoners? My name is Nathan Ng, and in today's video, we'll be running through our promised mid-patch update. Like always, we'll be following up on all the changes from the beginning of the patch and providing updated tier lists for all 5 roles. Make sure you hit that sub button so you can go ahead and stay tuned for the informative content such as this. Alright, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Beginning with the top lane, let's do a quick recap of the changes. First, Cho'Gath received a small nerf to his E. We kept him in the S tier at the beginning of the patch, and Cho'Gath has been held up. The previous buff to tank mythic items have prevailed, and Cho'Gath definitely still belongs in the S tier. For a tank, his damage output is still high, and either Turbo Chem Tank or Frostfire Gauntlet helps cover for his weaknesses. A highly anticipated nerf was to Pantheon, and our analysts were right to move him out of the OP tier. While his win rate has dropped significantly, he still holds a very high ban rate, which contributes to the statistic. In a world where he was never banned, Pantheon would probably have a win rate right above 50%, but at the moment he's falling a little bit short of that margin. Our analysts think that he's still worthy of the S tier because he still remains a great flex pick that punishes mistakes heavily. His global presence makes him a powerful solo queue pick as well. Next, Cinch received a small buff, and we've updated his placement into the A tier. His Q's AP ratio was slightly increased, and this had a surprisingly impactful effect. We've seen his win rate go up by a little more than a whole percent. The extra damage is proving to be the difference between towards the end of the laning phase, as well as later into the game when you generally have more ability power. Riven also received a major buff to her E, and like our analysts predicted, she's definitely an S tier. Her win rate has jumped up about 2% across most ranks, and in high elo, she's proving to be one of the most fearsome opponents. The more frequent shields and extra mobility had changed her gameplay a ton, and a good Riven is as terrifying to play against as ever. Finally, let's talk about Mordekaiser. While he only received a small buff to his E, we've actually seen his win rates increase significantly. We moved Mord into the S tier, but it's not solely because of this buff. The changes to Riftmaker have favored him in particular. Of course, Mordekaiser is a frontline champion, and adding some extra health to the item means that he'll have a lot less fragility in the early game. Especially early on when the only completed item you have is your mythic item, Mordekaiser is noticeably tankier, and the stat changes didn't hurt Mordekaiser nearly as much as the other champions. He already gained spell penetration with his E, and as the game progresses, he eventually attains roughly the same amount of Omnivamp as before. There have been a good amount of balance changes this season, so let me ask you something real quick. For our question of the day, what has been your favorite balance change from Season 11? You can include the preseason if you like. My favorite change was definitely the nerf to Akali. I'm sorry if you main her, but it was so frustrating to play against her when she could just spam Q so freely. I do hope she does get some buffs in the near future though, because I'm kind of a masochist, you know? I like pain. That's probably why I also play the bot lane. Let me know your answers in the comments down below, and let's hop back into the video. As for other changes that we made in this mid-patch update, we moved Fiora and Jax into the B tier. Obviously, the healing from Gore Drinker and Ravenous Hydra were nerfed this patch, leaving room for other classes in the top lane to shine. While it was expected that duelists using Trinity Force, Juggernauts with Stridebreaker, and tanks would rise up holding hands, this hasn't been the case. It's quite clear that the meta is shifting heavily towards Juggernauts at the moment. Their incredible early to mid-game dominance makes it so difficult for other champions to have a chance to even scale in the first place. For example, champions like Fiora and Jax. Irelia seems to be doing okay though, and is proving to be a favorite amongst high elo players because of her high damage output, mobility, and flexible optimization upon any matchup. Thus, we have champions utilizing Stridebreaker who's been popping off. Gnar has been doing very well in this regard, but Garen is proven to be an outlier. He's an exceptional pick at all ranks, but especially powerful in low elo. Garen's low ban rate can be attributed to his one-dimensional playstyle and the fact that he's not nearly as frustrating to play against as a champion like Darius. However, he's still one of the ultimate stat check champions right now in the top lane, and it's really just a question of, do I win a fight with him at all points of laning phase? The answer to that question is usually no. He's simple, which adds to his power as he's already strong. In other words, it's not the case of him being strong because he's easy. Instead, he's strong and him being easy makes him even better. Therefore, he's an OP pick. Our OP picks in the top lane are Darius and Garen, followed by Pantheon, Malphite, Aatrox, Shen, Wukong, Camille, Maokai, Poppy, Cho'Gath, Gnar, Riven, and Mordekaiser in the S tier. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the jungle. We've got some big changes to talk about in the jungle, but first, let's follow up on the changes this patch. First is Olaf. Look at what they did to my boy. They massacred him. His win rate has dropped nearly 4% this patch. He's a border of an A and S tier right now, but note that he was severely overpowered in previous patches. With direct nerfs as well as nerfs to Gore Drinker, Olaf has been a lot more manageable this patch, and will actually lean towards the lower placement and move him into the A tier for this update. Rammus is up next, and like our analysts expected, the small nerf to his E hasn't really done much. he remains an S tier pick as the patch plays out. Elise received a couple of nerfs this patch, making her way weaker in high elo. Unfortunately, she's still proving to be one of the strongest picks in the game. While server dependent, Elise is still considered an OP pick or top tier pick by some, but we personally believe that there are stronger picks than her. Elise does rely heavily on snowballing, and if you manage to pick up some kills on other champions like Hecarim or Udyr, it feels like the game becomes much more one-sided. She remains an S tier pick, however. Like our analysts predicted, Ivern is still proving to be a solid S tier pick in spite of nerfs to his E this patch. He fills a very unique role in the jungle, as he's the creepiest mofo that walks around with his freaking 90% legs and it's just a face and arms. It's so weird, man. He's also creepy, right? Am I the only one on this sentiment? Does anybody else feel this way? Anyway, he is a jungle and he needs some harder nerfs to dissuade players from using him, please. Udyr received some more nerfs this patch, but it's becoming more and more apparent that he's rather broken at the moment. We've been undervaluing him as a pick because Olaf was just basically a better version of him. However, now that Olaf is significantly weaker, it's the other way around. You play Udyr when you want an impressive amount of early game damage, and you try to force your opponents to take unfavorable fights. Olaf is a close second with this in-your-face playstyle, and I'm still shocked that we've hit a point where Udyr is actually this strong. Udyr's ban rate this patch has skyrocketed to 37% in high elo. A good amount of those probably a transfer of last patch's Olaf bans. It's easy for us to justify placing Udyr into the OP tier this patch, as he essentially fills Olaf's previous place there. Before moving on, I do want you guys to know that we're actually running a promotion on our website. Head over to ProGuides.com and you can actually use the code RANKUP2021 to get 20% off a subscription. We'll be offering this discount up until the 20th, so don't miss out. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue our follow-up. Another nerf was to Talia. Like our analysts expected, she took a decent hit, but at the same time, wasn't nerfed to the point where she's unplayable. She's still finding success in elite levels of play, but overall, she's proving to be a slightly above average pick, and we'll be keeping her in the A tier. Finally, Shyvana got some big AP buffs this patch. We haven't seen significant increases in her win rate in high elo though. Our analysts believe that given more time, new builds will surface with the huge changes that she received this patch, and she'll eventually prove that she's worthy of her current A tier placement. They are, however, optimistic about this because her overall win rate has increased by about 1.5% this patch. That being said, we made some shifts to the tier list. First, we moved Skarner to the S tier. He's been doing extremely well recently. Since the last patch, he's popped off because of the buffs to Turbo Chem Tank, and now that he's gotten even more games under his belt, our analysts feel confident that he deserves a spot in the S tier. One more notable pick is to Dr. Mundo. If you're gold or below, this guy is actually so broken. Players are much more reluctant to build Grievous Wounds, and he's extremely straightforward, further contributing to his power. Although we'll keep him in the B tier for now, you should probably take advantage of his strengths if you're trying to climb out of Iron, Bronze, or Silver. The very top of our tier list also has seen some big changes. First, Graves and Kha'Zix have been moved down from the OP tier into the S tier. They are borderline OP picks, and if the champions we've replaced them were banned out, you can absolutely fall back on them. Like we mentioned, Udyr takes one of these spots, and the other one belongs to Viego. Most players ban him out, and the fact that he's still powerful after being released so recently says a lot. His win rates are going to keep going up as players get more proficient with him. Not only that, he can be flexed into the top and mid lane as well. As a result, our OP picks are now Hecarim, Udyr, and Viego, followed up by Kha'Zix, Graves, Evelynn, Rammus, Echo, Kayn, Nunu, Ivern, Fiddlesticks, Karthus, Elise, and Skarner in the S tier. Next up, let's run through the mid lane. Okay, so first up, let's talk about Anivia in the mid lane. She did receive some small nerfs, but she's still extraordinarily strong. Her abilities to stall out games, high damage output, and crowd control make her a solid pick in almost any situation. Also, she scales incredibly, meaning that her ability to prolong games by constantly clearing waves is invaluable. Anivia retains her spot in the OP tier this patch. Another nerf was to Seraphine, and like our analysts expected, she's still amazing. Seraphine also retains her placement in the S tier, and with those nerfs to Moonstone Renewer very soon, we could probably see her move, but it's highly doubtful. Sylas received a small buff to his Q, and nothing is out of the ordinary for him. Like our analysts thought, there was very little change, and he'll retain his placement. The final change was for Vladimir, whose ultimate cooldown was lowered significantly. His win rate has increased by nearly a whole % this patch. Yeah, okay, we're gonna be keeping him in the A tier for now, but he should definitely and easily push for the S tier with some more nerfs on champions who are currently OP. Overall, the buff to his ultimate has led Vladimir to have more impact in the early to mid game. As a result, he can more consistently snowball off small leads and become the monster mid laner that haunts our dreams. Like Ivern. Ivern still haunts my dreams. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the shifts on the tier list. First is that we've added Tristana to the list. She's seen more play than Aurelion Sol, and I guess based on the rules, she has to be added. We'll be moving her to the B tier for now. She's a rather volatile pick, and Tristana definitely has moments where she can shine, and of course, the fact that she can be a flex pick between mid and bot lane is rather convenient. Another shift that's caught me off guard is that Corki has been moved to the B tier. There weren't any significant changes to note that may have caused this, and it just might be because burst damage has been toned down a bit since the beginning of the preseason. Gradually, he's managed to find his place in the mid lane as a scaling marksman, but is still outclassed by many other picks. Another champion that we've added is Garen. Obviously an incredible top laner, Garen also flexes into the mid lane and does practically well against every other melee champions. He's tanky, and his silence combined with his high damage output make him quite challenging to play against. Normally, when you play a melee mid, you'd expect to be rewarded for closing the distance and going for those aggressive trades, but Garen shakes things up. Set mid has also been gaining a lot more popularity. A flex pick into the top lane and support, he's also a pretty decent pick mid where his tankiness and high damage output make him a pretty tough opponent. You can't underestimate him because he has a surprising amount of kill pressure, and overextending just a little bit can go ahead and cost your lane. Finally, we made some big shifts to the top of our tier list in the mid lane as well. Fizz and Echo are still incredible picks, but we moved them aside for the two most popular champions right now, Yone and Yasuo. The small buff to shield bow this patch has done quite a lot for both of them. They've got some pretty stacked kits, so it's no surprise that even the smallest indirect buff could have this effect. Both these champions have climbed to the top of the charts in terms of play rate, and their ban rates are rather impressive as well. Overall, they both just individually pull out more than 25% of the bans. In high elo, players tend to lean more towards Yone as he's a bit safer and more versatile. However, Yasuo is still the most popular mid laner in the game at the moment, proving to be a powerful pick in high elo as well. ROP picks in the mid lane are Yone, Yasuo, and Anivia, followed up by Pantheon, Zed, Victor, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Malphite, Fizz, Echo, Seraphine, Kiana, and Viego in the S tier. With all that covered, let's head into the bottom lane next. For our first bottom lane follow-up, let's go ahead and talk about Jinx. She got buffed, and the good news is that she's definitely stronger than before. The bad news is that the difference is rather negligible. But hey, she lost a bunch of base health and her win rate didn't even drop. While we'll be keeping Jinx in the B tier, we do think that there's still room for her win rate to grow, as the buffs that she received aren't very straightforward. Actually, speaking of, in the next patch, a little spoiler alert, her HP gets reverted. So she's gonna have more range and her traps are gonna arm faster, and she's gonna have more HP. Also, those changes aren't exactly confirmed yet, but there's a good chance that they're gonna go through. Ezreal has also received a buff to his Q, and of course, his win rate has increased. This buff had a much bigger effect in high elo, where his win rate jumped up by a little more than a whole %. We made the appropriate adjustments and placed him in the S tier as our analysts underestimated the effect of this buff. Speaking of the S tier, we've also added Senna. Her ban rates have been steadily rising. Following some buffs and players optimizing her build, it's pretty clear that she's a powerful pick right now. Senna's ban rates have been rising, and in high elo, she's actually the third most banned marksman, falling behind Samira and of course, Kai'Sa. The final change that we made to our list is that we dropped Miss Fortune down into the S tier. Although MF is still one of the best marksman picks in lower elo, high elo players heavily favor the other ones. There are a ton of other champions that can simply outscale MF and do their best to avoid fighting her early on. Going even against one is enough, and plenty of players prefer to pick Kai'Sa over her whenever possible. Thus, our OP picks this patch are Kai'Sa, Jhin, and Seraphine, followed up by Samira, Ashe, Vayne, Ezreal, Senna, and Miss Fortune in the S tier. Now, let's go ahead and wrap it up with the supports. Our analysts feel pretty confident about keeping the support list almost the same as our initial patch rundown. One change that they have is their placement to Karma. Karma got a decent buff this patch, but is underperforming quite a bit. As a side note, she's slowly gaining popularity as a top laner, so the buffs did something. We might see her played more often in off roles soon, but maybe another buff wouldn't hurt. The last balance change this patch was to Rel, and she got some AP buffs. As expected, however, her win rates haven't really changed as a result of them. We'll still be keeping Rel in the S tier. The final adjustment that we've made to our support tier list is that we've gone ahead and moved Pantheon down to the C tier. The Pantheon nerf hit jungle Pantheon and top Pantheon pretty hard. While we didn't expect support Pantheon to take such a big hit, his win rate has dropped about a whole %, and at this point, he just doesn't really feel like an optimal support champion even if you're trying to utilize him as a flex pick. What made Pantheon such a strong support was that you could pick him and have a high amount of impact with so little gold. Various changes have made him more dependent on solo lane resources, and we think that he needed to be moved down the list, and the changes were needed. One notable pick that we want to talk about a little bit is Senna. Senna is equally as popular as a bot laner and as a support at the moment, or I guess supports are in the bot lane, you know what I mean. In high elo, however, players favor her as a bot laner, ADC. This leads us to conclude that Senna is rather reliant on that extra income. With Ginsu's Rageblade becoming a popular purchase on her, this only makes sense as the value of the item goes up as you build more crit chance. To build more crit chance, you of course need more items, and if you want more items, you need more gold. While weaker, Senna support is still competent and a great draft mix-up. The top of our tier list remains the same, with OP picks being Leona, Lulu, Thresh, and Seraphine, followed up by Maokai, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Brand, Nautilus, and Rel in the S tier. That'll be wrapping up our patch update for patch 11.13. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we really hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think, or if you have thoughts on our tier list in the comments down below. I also want to encourage you to join our Discord. We've got a great community, and we want you to be a part of it. Until next time though, as always, my name has been Nathan Ng. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.